Step Into Your Life with Julianne Williams. I have a special person today, Maryann Udel, and it couldn't have been a more meant to be episode today. She has done some really interesting things that she can share with us. But why I've been so excited about this particular episode is that Maryann and I both have a similar experience, which is we are both young widows, she being even younger than me at the time. But we both are passionate about talking about grief and loss and how those things matter. She is a certified life and business coach that focuses on grief and loss, and importantly has an agency called the Sheltering Tree that shares so much information and also provides many services so that if you need help with grief and loss there and coaching through that, Maryann has a myriad of offerings that you can access. So we're going to talk a little bit today about grief and loss, which I know is hard for us in the US and also really, I think, generally around the world, but in the US, probably harder than many other places. And again, both Mary and I have a passion about opening up this conversation so that we understand that grief is a normal response to loss, and to know that when we're going through it, there are ways out. So Maryann lost her husband when she was 24 years old and had to navigate those waters. Very similar to me in terms of having to figure it out. When you're young and you're a widow, you're kind of an outlier. Most women who lose their husbands are much older, and so it's a little bit harder to garner support or to figure it out because what you're trying to overcome has a different sort of take to it. So with that, I want to introduce to you Maryann Udel and of the Sheltering Tree, who is a certified life and business coach and a best-selling author. So she can tell us about her book as well. But Maryann, maybe you can start by just telling us a few more things about you, and then we can talk a little bit about grief and loss.
Thank you so much, Julianne. I'm so happy to be here and to get this conversation going. And I appreciate the introduction. Thank you.
It was a little long. Sorry about that. I could kind of talk about you forever because I just love what you do.
Uh, well, after I was widowed, I was living in Pennsylvania when it happened and sold the house and moved to New York City to pursue an acting career. There, I met my current husband. We've been married for 37 years this year. And it was not an easy route from there to where I am now. There was a lot of ups and downs, and I had to, like you said in the introduction, when you're young, you have to do a lot of figuring out on your own. I think there are organizations now that work with young widows, but then there was no internet. There was no social media, no cell phones. It was really rough. And it wasn't until 2017 that I actually became a coach. So I spent a long time, over 30 years, figuring out how to help myself. And then I knew that there was more for me to do in this life. I knew that I had a purpose, and I didn't want my husband's death to be in vain. So that's why I decided to start coaching people through loss. Also, because we don't talk about it enough. We don't open up to each other. And the only way to make it more normal is to speak about it, to understand that it is a normal emotional response to grieve. And that's how you're designed. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So there's just too much. I don't want to feel broken. I don't want to look like there's something wrong with me. I don't want people to feel sorry for me or pity me. People keep trying to fix me. There's all of these different things. And the more we open up the discussion, the more we'll learn how to help each other and be there during the
And
times of grief.
that is so true. So let's talk about that because, I know that and we'll talk about some other things, but the first thing that I'm wondering about is having been a younger widow myself
Mhm.
and um, then becoming a single parent, it changes your life so much. But how do you feel society and our culture influences that grieving process? You know, besides the fact that we're sometimes abnormal in our loss, we don't fit in the box of what people expect for a loss. But what do you think the cause is that we just can't have that conversation?
Well, I think that there's fear is one of the things.
Hmm.
People are afraid of anything that is not happy.
True.
You
Yes.
know, and social media has a huge impact on that, where all of the stuff you see is the highlights, the positive stuff. Although I have seen more vulnerability lately online, I
Hmm.
think people are allowing their humanity to show more and more since the pandemic,
Hmm.
specifically because everybody was feeling vulnerable at that point. But I think that there is this notion that you should be all better in 6 months,
Hmm.
a year. Oh my God, it's a year and I'm still not feeling better. Oh my goodness. I can tell you right now that I still feel blue during the month of September, which is the month when my husband died.
Hmm.
Been over 40 years since it happened, and I still have that sort of a low energy for
Hmm.
the body doesn't forget. So I
Right.
think that acknowledging the fact that you learn how to live with your grief, you don't get over it
Right.
because it doesn't go away. It's
No.
part of you.
Yes.
Whatever the event is that happened is an experience you've had. And if you've lost your love, your grief is going to be very deep. And it's not something that you can just shake off or meet somebody and have it go away. And the one thing about my current husband, Jim, I think it was on the first date he actually found out that I was a widow. And
Hmm.
he was the first man I met who wanted to hear more.
Oh.
He wanted to know about Bob, my first husband. He wanted to hear what he was like because he knew that that relationship was part of who I am.
Right.
And he wanted to be able to respect that. So he would often joke, well, who gets you in heaven? You know?
Bob or I.
Yes. So I think that we don't talk about it enough. We think we're broken when we're dealing with grief.
Right.
Um, we're not allowed to show all of the feelings. You know, if you show too many emotions, you're labeled a certain way.
Hmm.
And they're and people think that there's a quick fix when there isn't.
And I love that you brought up the fact that, so for me, 2024 is 19 years. And
Mm,
you don't forget.
mhm,
Um, I that's when I work with clients on and off, or I talk about grief. I think that we expect that we will just get over it
mhm.
and we're going to move on. And we do move forward, but really, why would you want to forget? Because
Yeah,
Bob was and still is an important part of your life.
yeah,
You're honoring him,
yes, yeah,
right?
yes.
But and so but to just to say I'm going to move on, that is not how we honor people or circumstances or things that we love. And so I think making it normal to say, yeah, that sadness, there's going to be a part of that that does stay with you, and it's okay.
Yeah. I think on the opposite side, there are also people who don't want to grieve because they don't want to let go.
Oh, of course.
And they're afraid they're going to lose the person if they grieve.
Yes.
And so there is this hanging on to the past
Hmm.
and they knowing there's nothing you can do to change it.
Correct.
You can't bring someone back from the dead. You can't get your job back. How
Hmm.
many divorced people remarry and think, oh, it'll be better this time, but without figuring out what it was that was wrong.
Right.
But I think once people realize that you're going to go through a turbulent time when you're dealing with grief, you're going to go through a time when you're more emotional in the beginning.
Hmm.
Probably. I don't
Hmm.
want to say because everybody deals with grief differently, and someone might just be numb.
And so let's talk about that. Is there a right way to grieve? Because that's kind of what we're starting to talk about is, uh,
Hmm.
people have an expectation about what we're supposed to do when we're grieving. And they even have expectations for certain types of losses, I think.
Right.
And so talk to me about that, because I think this is really interesting.
Well, there is no right way to do it. There's no checklist. There's no stages that you go. You first you go through this, then you go through that, then you go through this, then you get that's not what it is at all. You feel what you feel when you feel it.
Oh, I love that.
And that's one of the chief things that I work through with my clients. I get them into the habit on every day saying, how am I feeling today?
Hmm.
Why? Knowing why you feel a certain way. And then if you notice that, oh, when you look back and see, oh, I was feeling happy 3 days in a row.
Yeah, like victory.
Yeah. And it also, it not just gives you a checkpoint for what it is you're feeling, but figuring out why you're feeling that way. If you're particularly angry, what was it that made you feel angry? If you're feeling really sad or depressed or grateful, what are those things? So you're a we are feeling people.
Hmm.
We're human beings, and that's how we're designed. So why deny the feelings? So to answer your question, there is no right way. There is no end. It's an evolution. You learn how to live with your grief, and comparing. Well, you shouldn't be that sad because nah, nah, nah. It's just it's not fair. Someone who loses a child or has a miscarriage
Hmm.
can feel the same way as someone who had a breakup or
Hmm.
worse. Or
Hmm.
there's there is no right or wrong way to feel. There is just how you feel.
Well, and I like to say to people, because people do want to compare grief, like, well, okay, um, you lost your husband,
Hmm.
and that's worse than this, or
Hmm.
you lost your child, so that's worse, or whatever that comparison is. But in the end, your grief is your worst grief. I mean, your grief is, it, unfortunately, comparing doesn't heal you
No.
or the other person.
And it could make you feel bad for feeling, and then you won't want to open up about it because I don't have a right to feel
Hmm.
that this isn't as bad as what she experienced. And wait a minute, mine is worse than hers. And why is she making such a fuss? Pay attention to
Exactly.
me.
Yeah.
So I think that you can't compare. And everyone goes through more than one loss through their life.
Hmm.
And everybody has something they're dealing with right now.
Hmm. I tell my kids all the time, no one gets a perfect life.
Right. If you go out the door every day and just think everybody is trying to overcome a challenge of some sort. Even if their life appears perfect on the outside, there could be something. They could have a parent who is ill. They could have somebody in another country that they're worried about. They could have a business that's failing. They could have, um,
Yeah.
you know, there could be a whole, they maybe they have a disease that they don't want to tell anybody about. That every person you see has something,
Yes.
either
It's the
present
the
or
same condition.
Mhm. Yeah. So if you think about that, and even if you're losing patience with someone in the grocery store, oh, they must be they're having a real, I'm sorry you're having a really hard day, and just treat them like a human being.
So, what are some of those misconceptions about grief? Because you talked about, just the timing, the stages, but what else do you think that people need to know about grief and loss that will help them process through that integration into from early and very emotional grief to that sort of like the journey of grief?
Right.
Because that's what I see it as.
Right. Well, I think recognizing that there's a lot of different reasons to grieve. Any particular loss or major change is a reason to grieve. So that is something that a lot of people don't even think about. There's the stages that people often talk about that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote, and she was actually observing people who were approaching death, and those were the stages they were going through. It's not intended to be a checklist or guidepost for people who are grieving someone's death or loss. There's no order for the grieving process. If you think it's going to be, a graph going up, but really it's a scribble picture.
I
you know
know it is.
yes. So people think that, oh, I'll be done with this, soon.
Hmm.
And then 2 years, and I'll be done with this soon. And it's so I think realizing that it's an evolution
I
of.
like how you talk about it being an evolution
Mhm,
because you learn more and more about yourself
mhm,
through the grief, and you learn more and more about how you can heal
mhm.
those really open wounds. You're still
Right,
going to have the scar, but
right,
it is an evolution of learning how do I deal with that open
right.
wound that is
Well, it's sort of a cylindrical journey. You start out and then you go a little bit higher and a little bit bigger, and then you can, because of your life experience, you just understand things differently. And I know that if he had not died, I would not have this mission
Mhm,
myself. I would
mhm,
not be doing the work that I'm doing.
mhm.
I would have a very different journey.
Yes. That's some of grief and loss too, is I mean, I know I grieve the fact that I don't get to grow old with my husband, that my children don't have a father, that no one, I don't have the dad to come and walk her down the aisle when she gets married. So those secondary losses just continue, and I think dealing with those
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's where I think people believe you should just ignore that and just say it's over, it's done. Like just
No, no, because that's a part of who you are. And
Mhm.
um, I've talked to people who were getting ready to be married, and one of the parents was not there, or the grandparents were not there, and they wanted to figure out a way to honor the
Mhm.
person that was not present. And then,
Mhm.
really, it's a heightened emotional time, anyhow. So,
Mhm.
why add on to that? I know that when Jim and I got married, a lot of people came from out of town. We got married in New York. People who knew me and Bob and were friends from then. I was in such an emotional state when I walked down the aisle. I was holding my breath, smiling, fighting back the tears. I got up to the altar and Jim said, "Breathe." And I just started sobbing
Oh,
from all of the emotion that was coming up.
yeah.
It
It's
was
overwhelming.
seeing all the people and knowing how much love was there.
Mm-hmm.
But because I had not fully dealt with all of those feelings before the wedding, it was, they had to come out.
Mm-hmm.
I recovered, so I didn't go
Of
through
course.
the entire ceremony sobbing, but I think people understood.
Well, I I mean, you had people there who showed up to show the support because you did your dreams were shattered with Bob,
Hmm.
and you were taking on this new path with Jim.
Hmm.
So when you know that people are happy for you and that they've also walked that path through the initial loss to some place of joy, there's just a lot of appreciation, I think, from a grieving person
Yeah.
to know that there's that all of their emotions and their ability to try to move into a different way of living is accepted, because you don't feel accepted a lot of times when you're grieving.
No, no, and I think a lot of one of the reasons I left Pennsylvania, aside from the fact that I wanted to pursue an acting career, was that all of the friends that I had were joint friends,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really uncomfortable to be friends without Bob.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know how to behave, and
Mm-hmm.
I certainly didn't know how to behave, so it was just really difficult. And I said, it's just too hard. And it wasn't running away, it was making peace with it,
Mm-hmm.
realizing that it was time for me to establish my own place in the world, to establish my own sense of belonging by myself. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I did. In fact, it was on a walk. I did a lot of walking after Bob died,
Mm-hmm.
a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And on one particular afternoon, I was out and I said, "What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do?" And Bob said, "Well, how about acting?" So that was, I said, "Yeah, how about that?" I mean, that's what I got my degree in. So it was, it was the logical step. So sometimes you just have to listen for those little intuition nudges. And I think figuring out what to do afterwards is one of the hardest things. I didn't have any children to raise by myself, so it was probably a little bit easier for me. I don't know if I could have handled it with children. I mean, I know that I would have gotten a lot of support, so
Yeah, I mean, I think we just do what we have to do. If
yeah,
that would have been your situation, then you'd have done it. And it just that's
yeah,
just one more part of my journey
right.
is working through my children's grief with them too.
Yes, yes, and that is hard. I think that parents try to protect children. There was a client of mine whose father had died when she was 13,
Mhm.
and the neighbors told her she had to be strong for her mother. She didn't get to go to her dad's funeral. She had to keep a stiff upper lip, not supposed to cry. And um, she came to me. I think I need to work with you. I'm crying all the time. So all of that emotion was still inside of her
Yeah,
50 years later.
yeah.
And after about a year of working together, I mean, she smiles a lot more now. And she has
Well,
learned how to
and
honor
that's
her father.
yeah, I mean, I try to say to the people that I work with and just in general is, if you don't feel it, you can't release it, and then it just stays right there. And
Yeah.
I know for me, I probably delayed my grieving process, and I didn't realize I was doing that until
Mm.
now that I'm in a much better place because I was decimated, but then I was also watching my children grieve and they were little, and I did not have the emotional bandwidth to help them with their grief and to deal with my own.
Hmm.
But really, what I should have done is dealt with mine first because then I could have been even better for them.
Well, I don't, you can't second guess yourself.
So,
You know,
no, but I think if I was going to give myself advice again, what I would say is,
oh,
I wish I would have known at that point. But again, you don't know. It's
right.
uncharted journey. But now that I'm older and done more work around understanding grief, I really think that if I would have spent a little bit more time trying to get my head back in the game in a different way, and I didn't believe me, I did the best that I could, and I have two great kids, so not perfect, but they're perfectly imperfect for me.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
think,
I do think that you have to take care of your own grief before you can really help
mm,
witness somebody else's.
right. I mean, it's just like establishing, hmm, yeah, your own self-care because you can't pour from an empty pitcher.
That's right. That's right. And that's something, if anyone's going through that, that's something that if I could step back, I might consider just maybe going to counseling sooner.
Hmm.
Um, maybe making some different decisions. I don't know what they are, but I really think that there are some things that I could have done just a little bit more in terms of taking care of myself so that I could be a good grief support.
And I think that a lot of that depends on what kind of support you get for just the general necessities in life.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
who is helping you with the cooking and the cleaning and the grocery shopping and the babysitting and all of that sort of stuff. And if you have pets, you got all that stuff to worry about too. So um it's there's no prescription that is
Right.
the same for everybody. I think
That's right.
you really do have to feel your way through it.
You do.
I think that the first step though is feeling the feelings.
Yeah. And that hurts.
Yes, it does. And that's another reason why people don't want to grieve. They don't want to go through it because it does hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it hurts is because you loved.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be regrets. There might be, some unspoken words or something you needed to forgive or be forgiven. Or there's a lot of different reasons for the feelings that you have and the reason it hurts. But the only way to get through it is to go through it.
It is. And that is really what I would also encourage people to remember that you will stop crying. You may cry a lot, but you will stop.
Hmm.
Um, the
Hmm.
more you hold it in, the longer you're going to do it probably at another time. And so it's just one of these things that you just almost you have to give yourself permission
Hmm.
to be in pain and to work through the feelings and see what comes next,
Right.
right?
Right. Well, one thing that helped me quite a bit besides the walking was journaling. I
Mm-hmm.
just stream of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote and wrote. I have volumes of notebooks and journals.
Wow.
And I went back. I found the one that I started right after Bob died. I was cleaning, I had a box of old stuff, and I said, wow, wow. Just reading the perspective from myself at that young age. Pretty profound. Maybe
That would
that'll be
be
the next book.
on it. I was just going to say, you can make a book with your journals that would show, I mean, whatever you're willing to share, because it would show that path that we have, that it is so up and down, but also that you do get to the other side.
Hmm.
There is a way to create life honoring the person that you love, or whatever situation that you're grieving, um, but also finding a way to really to have that life that's full of joy and worth living, so that that doesn't the whatever loss you've experienced doesn't define the rest of your time here on earth.
Right. Well, I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. That
Mhm.
I mean, in a way, it is defining, but it's not controlling.
Maybe that controlling is a better word. I like that. Or just that if it doesn't define you in a way that keeps you from reaching your potential.
Right. I
Yeah.
think that there needs to be an acknowledgement of the reality of the situation. What
Hmm.
is it that's happened? Okay.
Hmm.
All right. I can't do what I thought I was going to do. We can't have the life we thought we were going to have. What can I do?
Hmm.
What brings me joy?
Hmm.
And what is it? Wow, I don't have those constraints. So now what? Now what? People feel guilty
Hmm.
for being happy,
Yes.
and you don't have to feel that. How many times have you been to a service after a funeral where people are sobbing in one corner and another corner, or that sobbing evolves into fits of laughter because
Hmm.
they're telling a story about the person who's gone? Um, it's an emotional roller coaster.
It sure is.
Yeah.
So what about your new book?
Well, I'm part of an anthology.
Oh,
It's
I love anthologies.
Unleashing Your Soul Level Magic, and it's available on Amazon.
Wonderful.
My particular chapter is called From Grief to Purpose. So I talk about becoming a young widow and then flash forward to deciding to become a coach and talk about my coaching practice and the process that I guide my clients through. So it's inspirational. It says the tales of transition to help unwrap your special gifts. So it's
Mm.
um, everyone who wrote in the anthology has a story of overcoming something, doing something they didn't think they could, um, making their life into something they had no idea would ever happen. And that's, it's very gratifying to now have a book.
It's a congratulations. It's a lot of work, and it also is a very emotional experience.
Hmm.
Not only to share, but when you're putting yourself out there in such a vulnerable way, and then to see if people are actually going to relate with you.
Right.
It's almost like, am I going to be accepted? But I love that. So we can get that book on Amazon. Now, if someone wanted to find you to have work through the sheltering tree, um, that your website, the
Uh,
sheltering tree?
the website is actually yourshelteringtree.com.
Okay,
And
perfect.
so they can reach me through there. And on the site, they can set up an appointment to find a time to talk with me. Because before I work with anyone, I always take the time to find out what's going on. And if I'm not the right person for them, I have some recommendations where to send them for help.
I love that because, we all need something a little different, and we can't be all things to all people. So knowing if it's a good fit, especially when you're talking about highly emotional issues, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And we'll link that below. You also can be found on Facebook
Yes.
and LinkedIn. Where else?
Instagram.
Okay.
So all of that is on Facebook. It's um, the best place is through my personal page,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
LinkedIn as well on my personal page. So
Wonderful. Because I know that there's going to be somebody who wants to reach out and touch base with you for that healing journey to either begin or to continue in a different way. I am so grateful for for your time today and for you sharing so much about your experience and some of the challenges of being a young widow and sort of some of the things that you did to find your way to a beautiful life, um, different than what you planned, but a beautiful life.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Julianne. I'm happy to have shared all of this and hope that everybody will start talking more.
Me too. Me too. So everyone, again, let's open up that conversation about grief and loss and mental health. It's really important that we take care of these things that are inside of us that matter so that we can be the best person that we can be. We can live to our purpose. We can live to what God has purpose for us. And it allows us to also enjoy the time that we have here on the earth because it's very, very fast, is what I'm noticing. The time is going by very fast. So we were meant to live joyfully. We were also meant to grieve. And so it does come down to the scripture that talks about the fact that there is a season for everything.
Mm.
So Maryann, again, thank you for sharing with us. Everyone, you can reach me here on Phoenix TV or on my YouTube channel, but also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and my website, www.juliannewilliams.com. So again, thank you everyone. Let's journey together, and I'll see you on the next episode.